Member for South West Coast.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and I rise to speak on the deliver my budget reply. And I'll begin by saying we've got some good news finally after 6 long years of advocating to the government the importance of South West healthcare to the region. We have $384 million to complete the second stage of the hospital. So fantastic news. I'm pleased. I joined the CEO on a Zoom meeting the other night to pay tribute to all the people who had contributed to the advocacy and the hard work to get the project in front of the government so that we could stand here today and be thanking those people in the community who worked so hard. So it was great to be recognised too by the local CEO, Craig Fraser, for the work that I did advocating for the hospital. Obviously a very important project for me, having trained in that hospital, having worked in that hospital and having a deep understanding of how the staff in accident and emergency particularly and theatre, who have been putting up with some pretty cramped and difficult environments to deliver the fantastic results that they do under those circumstances. So congratulations to the whole team at South West Healthcare. Your hard work, your persistence has paid off. There'll be some challenging times over the next couple of years or so whilst the works takes place. I remember being part of that when the intensive care was revamped at Warrnambool actually, and it is a challenging time. So very good news for the Warrnambool community, but also the entire South West, because this is the facility that needs to be the base, as it's why it's called the base hospital, so that we can have so decent healthcare for the whole of the region. Whilst it was terrific to have such good news, I was surprised to see that with the borrowings of $155 billion, which I completely understand given we need to kickstart the economy, the fact that we didn't have increased budget in the roads sector was really quite surprising, actually. And as the Shadow Minister for Roads, you know, I know that I've brought up in this place, just like I did with the hospital, the importance of the regions having a modern transport network that actually meets the demands of the community who service Victoria with the goods that they produce, taking them down to the port of Melbourne, Portland and Geelong to export. But these roads are just not up to that standard. So when we see in the budget a similar amount towards just maintenance of the roads like we've seen for last year, then it's quite disappointing, because as Infrastructure Victoria, who have released their report again today, said in their last report that investing in regional roads is a way to actually make sure we get good results for jobs in the local economies, and you know it's imperative. The community of South West Coast, the communities of regional Victoria right across the state, will be very shocked to see that this opportunity was missed, because we all know that the regional roads are in a very poor state. So we want to see our families getting home safely, and we want to see our kids on the school bus getting to school without the bus drivers being frightened of the task they have at hand, which is what I get reported to me quite a bit nowadays. So Princes Highway West in my part of the world is a project that we were really sure would be in this budget, because the federal government have given most of the money or half the money and said, you know, just match it or just give a contribution and let's get on with getting that Princes Highway West done. It's an absolute need, not want. It's and unfortunately, there was nothing in that. But, you know, I hope the government will reconsider. There is some money that they have available to them within the budget that's not allocated. So some of those projects, I hope they do come out to the regions. You know, with the hospital, I brought the Shadow Minister out, Georgie Crozier. Prior to her, the Shadow Minister of Mary Wooldridge. We didn't see Labor come out with such enthusiasm. We did eventually see the last Labor Minister, Jenny Mikakos, come out in the 12 months prior to announcing the hospital, and prior to that, the previous Health Minister took a couple of years to come out to the regions. And same with you know, the Minister for Roads. It'd be great if you get out into the regions, you know, come out to South West Coast, come out to the border communities like Nelson, who have really missed out in this budget and who are asking for some respect for the fact that they need their roads invested in, because the further away you get from Melbourne, it's quite a fact that you hit the poorest roads, and when you hit the border of South Australia, beautiful roads. So there's something going on, and I think if perhaps the Minister could come to visit and have an experience, he will find out for himself that this is not a need, this is not a want, this is a need. So the other disappointment with the budget was the fact that the Lookout project, a project in Warrnambool that is shovel ready, has the community behind it from a point of view they've actually put their hands in their pockets and raised money. It's a project that's most needed. It's a project that will deliver rehabilitation drug beds to people who have made the commitment to turn their life around and just need that period of time post-detox to actually get that reset time to change their habits and work through some new life experiences so that they can break that habit. So it's a real shame when you've got a community behind it, you've got people motivated and they want to stay around their families and they can't because we've got no rehabilitation beds available. Again, I'm hoping the government will reconsider. That is clearly in this day and age with the pressures of mental health issues and drug addiction that can or don't always go hand in hand, but sometimes do. With what's been going on, we really need some support there for our community members. The other really interesting part of this budget was from my shadow portfolio responsibility in freight. And there was absolutely not $1 allocated to any freight investments. The Port Rail Shuttle Network project sits idle. And, when you look at the fact that the government talks about commitment to getting trucks off the road, particularly in the suburbs of Melbourne, you have to ask yourself, where is the real commitment here? We've got the Murray Basin Rail project, which the government have botched completely. $440 million has gone into the project, and instead of that being the amount that was needed to deliver it, what they've ended up with a project that is actually worse than when it was started. So trains coming from Mildura, I think it's down to Bendigo, will actually get there slower than prior to the project beginning. The Minister has completely stuffed this project, and she's ignoring all of the regional communities who are saying this will be good for farmers, this will be good for export dollars, this will be good for income for Victoria, and it's ignoring the fact, there's 134,000 trucks that will be needed to take the grain harvest this year down to the port for export. So can you imagine how many trucks are going to go hurtling through the suburbs of Melbourne? So I think there's a lot of goodwill in the farming community and there's a lot of goodwill in the Melbourne community for farmers, and I don't think the government perhaps recognises the missed opportunity there to get that project up and running and delivering for the whole of Victoria. One of the areas of disappointment again was the fact that we've all recognised during COVID the importance of some things being manufactured here in Australia. We don't want to see a situation where we're held to ransom and we need things such as what we had with the situation with PPE, for example. But the other thing is, it made us all talk for a long time. We've all talked for a long time about the importance of manufacturing, but it made us all really hone in on that commitment we have now of buying Australian owned. And we're seeing that in the habits of the community. But we in South West Coast have manufacturing. And we've got manufacturing in the dairy industry, we've got manufacturing in Alcoa, and Alcoa in particular do a very good job of being environmentally focused on improving their efficiencies. They're above targets with getting their renewable energy use up. But the government have missed an opportunity whilst we're all transitioning as much as we can into renewables. We need to recognise that we've still got to support manufacturing that we have here, and there was nothing for Alcoa. We can't afford to lose a manufacturing business like that is environmentally responsible because our price of electricity is too high. The government does need to understand there has to be support for Alcoa, and I think even embracing the fact that they are doing such a good job and doing everything they can. So a government of Victoria supporting them would be what I would have expected to have seen in the budget. On the Portland, There was some money for a 5.9 million for a hub, but there's not a lot of detail on that yet. But what was missing, and it wasn't a sporting hub, it was to manage the economic diversification. But the Portland basketball and other facilities in the Portland area really were really looking forward to some sort of support from the government. Sporting facilities have done it very tough, as have many volunteer organisations, such as Port Fairy SES, who just early in the spring had that big flood event, and it really showed everybody once again how the SES volunteers go out in extreme conditions of rain, hail, wind, and yet in Port Fairy they can't even return to the sanctuary of a decent home because their facilities is actually leaking with holes in the roof, and it's freezing, and it's completely unacceptable. And when you've got people doing volunteer work in such extreme conditions, you'd hope that we could actually show them the respect of having somewhere decent to return home to. So I'm sure there's money that's still available, and I hope the government is listening to that request that the Port Fairy SES that are waiting for funding so they can join the fire brigade and build an efficient facility that doesn't waste taxpayers' money, because it makes complete sense to home them together. The Portland Coast Guard, which is another example of volunteers who go out and help our community by helping people out on boats who have got themselves into strife. It actually does saves our government money. We've got all these people just training and giving up their time, and they don't even have it's not even a home, it's just this shelter on the coast. And we all know how cold it can be on the coast, and they're out on the coast when they're extreme conditions, because that's why people get into trouble, is it's usually in extreme conditions. So these guys don't even have walls on the shelter above their head where they come together and try and train and do what they need to do to keep our community safe. There's plenty of projects that need more money, I know that, but the Warrnambool Breakwater and the boat ramp, two projects that are very important to the local economy. It's a tourism part of the world, so having those sorts of projects invested in so we can, attract visitors, particularly post-COVID, was something I would have liked to have seen in the budget, and we've advocated hard for, and I think it's time that the government actually start to look at the regions. They've invested, or they've borrowed $155 billion, and it's not something I'm nervous about. I'm not nervous about borrowing. What I am nervous about, though, and what we saw 2 days ago with the loss of the credit AAA rating, was a real reflection of the assessors of the confidence or lack thereof in the Labor government. And I don't have, as I keep saying, I've been in business and I've borrowed fairly hefty sums of money to run a business and to grow, and I don't have any issue with that. But I know when you are assessed, it's your capacity to pay back, and often as part of that assessment is what your history has been. And when we look at the Labor government, what we do know is historically they've not been the best managers of money, and we saw that during the Kane-Kerner era. And whilst you might say, oh, well, that's history, I would urge you to look at the budget just before the pandemic hit and before the bushfires, before anybody on the other side tries to say, oh, well, that's a long time ago, what about now? Well, okay, we'll talk about now. And just before the pandemic and just before the bushfires, this government was already in a hell of a state, and the budget was looking pretty poor, and the blowouts for the projects they manage is the reason why. So no wonder when they go to borrow, there's a nervousness around their ability to repay, because there's a history of blowouts, and that means it's like the tunnel, the Metro Tunnel. I think it was $5 billion that it was meant to cost, and now it's up to 3 times that. Well, that's like saying I'm going to build a house for $300,000. It's not about saying I want now change the plan. I want 4 bathrooms. I want a double story, and it costs $900,000. No, this is if you get the same house for 3 times the price. So we're getting a tunnel budgeted for 5, now blown out to 3 times that. And that's just one example. So no wonder the government are now starting to yell out, because they know their history of managing money is poor. The community know that. We Liberals have a very strong history of managing budgets, managing money, and let's watch what we see with the blowouts. Let's watch what comes ahead. But I would be very nervous with the Victorian community if I was... I'm nervous. As a Victorian community member, I'm nervous. And we will watch, but I won't let these blowouts go unnoticed, and I'll make sure, particularly in my part of the world, things like the hospital, that every dollar spent delivers for the community of South West Coast.